What's up trainers, Chirpy's here, and I'm super excited after a long hiatus to bring you a video on what I think is the best deck right now to grind the ladder in Pokemon Pocket. That deck is no other than the new Espeon X paired with Sylveon. Now, the reason I love this deck so much is that it's extremely consistent with Sylveon drawing you a bunch of cards. It's extremely fast. A lot of times getting Espeon up on curve is too much to overwhelm the opponent, and a lot of times just runs them over and steals games. And then last but not least, it's extremely flexible, meaning this deck has play into just about any other deck in the meta. Now, I decided to take this deck onto the ladder kind of as my first games into the ladder this season, and I was extremely impressed with how strong it was. Immediately took me to a 77% win rate on about the first 20 games I played, only dropping 4 of those games, and I absolutely love the way this deck played. Obviously, if you like content like this and want to see more of it, go ahead and like the video, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Now let's talk a little bit about how this deck works. All right, so there's a few variations of this deck going around, but really only have a few small tweaks or adjustments between them. Now the main deck is comprised of Espeon X, which is really the main Pokemon that you're going to be using in order to attack and really win your games. You've got Sylveon X, which even though this deck does use Psychic Energy, and you can actually power up the Sylveon X, a lot of times you are not doing that, right? Sylveon X is really just there to draw you cards. Beyond that, we have 2 sets of Eevees, both the Eevee X and the normal new Eevee with the Find a Friend capability, which just kind of helps you, draw out, really drawing into that Espeon, which is what you're really looking for to get online as soon as possible. You've got supporter cards like Eevee Bag, you've got Cape in order to kind of put your Espeon X over that 150 breakpoint, which is really, really important in this meta currently. We've added, silver here. You could run 1, even 2 of them. It's up to you. I actually swapped out one of the silvers for an extra cape, but really it's up to you how you want to do that. We have Sabrina and Cyrus for tempoing the game, and Cyrus for a lot of times closing it out. And then once again, we have Mars for hand disruption. Now, the way that this deck wants to work is it wants to go second. Really, that's how this deck does super, super well. And if I had one kind of gripe about how this deck works, is that it doesn't really have a great, it doesn't really have a great strategy for when you are going first, like other decks like Darkrai Giratina, right? Which they don't really care which, if they're going first or second. So really what you want to do is you want to get an Eevee down in the active spot, and then you want to use that ability as soon as you're able to put an energy on it in order to draw a card, draw a Pokemon card. Then you want to basically evolve directly into Espeon, put that second energy on it, and immediately start swinging and healing. Now you're using Sylveon basically to essentially evolve on your bench and draw the cards as you need them, really so that you can actually get a second Espeon online as well behind your initial one. Now what this does is it lets you be able to cycle your Espeons in and out while healing 60 each time. This gives them so much more sustain, and in the late game, a lot of times is just a little bit too much for the opponent to handle. However, what I found is that when this deck does go second, getting the Espeon online on curve, a lot of times is just too much for the opponent and just overwhelms them before they're able to get anything set up, either on the front line or in the back. Now, a few of the things that you need to remember with this deck is that it struggles a little bit against kind of the Crobat Darkrai deck that's floating around out there, as your Espeon is going to take super effective damage from dark attacks. That's when you really want to be leveraging your Cape, your Eevee Bag, and ideally, if you can, be swapping your Espeons in and out in order to avoid taking any unnecessary knockout points. You see that we have the non-X Sylveon in this deck as well, which is a tremendous kind of flex role. Really, it's there to handle Oricorio, that annoying chicken, but really it actually does give you the ability to actually swing sometimes for really big damage when you have a bunch of your Eevee evolutions online on your bench. And so overall, this deck was super, super powerful. You're going to see a lot of content creators running it. You're going to see it on the ladder quite a bit. And so let's take a look at some of its matchups and some of the ways that I like to play this deck to try to give you a little bit of advantage when you bring it onto the ladder. All right, moving into game one here, we're going to go ahead and see we are going first. So not really that ideal. This deck really wants to be going second. We see Metal Energy, and we are going to assume that this is most likely going to be a Solgaleo deck. So a deck that can hit really hard and fast, and not necessarily ideal for us now that we are going first. So we see here, we're just going to go ahead and throw up our Pokeball. We're going to go ahead and fill our bench with as many EVs as we possibly can. The idea is that you never want to be stuck not having an EV ready to be evolved into like an Espeon or particularly a Sylveon on the bench, so that you can get that card draw as soon as possible. So you're not really too worried about things like Sabrina's in this case. So we're going to wait for our opponent, and so they do actually have the Cosmog. They're able to put an energy on it. They got the Morlaw up front, which if they're able to evolve it can continue drawing into cards. We find another EV, so not ideal, but we do have our Espeon in hand, and that's going to be great here. Now we have a decision to make. We either decide, do we put our energy on the leading Eevee and take the chance that they do have the rare candy in the Solgaleo, or do we put it on our back Eevee and just actually let them swing into us, clear the Eevee, and swing back with the Espeon? So we know they've got 5 cards in their hand. They're about to draw into another one, and we're not going to take that chance. So this decision right here is super, super, super important. And in fact, if I'm right and they do evolve into the Solgaleo, which they do, is most likely going to be the only reason we're able to potentially have a chance in this game. So we see they've got the Solgaleo online. They're going to go ahead and use its ability to bring it into the active spot, and they're going to clear out our Eevee. And right there, that would have been game over for us if we had put the energy on that Eevee. So sometimes when going first, you kind of have to slow play and build up on the bench, especially if you think that Eevee in front is going to be vulnerable to something like this. So they've even got a cape on their Solgaleo, which honestly is better for us than having the leftovers, where they get to heal basically that damage every turn. And so, drawing into the red is also really important. Having the red and the Eevee bag, being able to stack those for an extra 30 damage could be really, really crucial here. So you're going to see that we're going to go ahead and evolve into the Espeon. We're going to go ahead, and because we want to maybe give ourselves the ability to use another trainer card next turn, we're going to use the red now, and we're going to go ahead and take that damage. And so that way, if we draw into like a Professor's Research, we'd be able to use that alongside the Eevee bag. Now, if they are able to heal their Solgaleo here, it's just pretty much over for us, right? And so it looks like they don't have the Lily, and that's great. This is basically game over, right? We can go ahead and throw up the Professor's Research, draw into some cards, but this game is over, right? We can go ahead, we can, place the energy really wherever we want. We can use the ability to heal, and then we can go ahead and swing into the Solgaleo. And most likely, they're not going to have a strong enough follow-up. They're going to be a little bit too slow here, and we should be able to have this game, particularly with 2 Eevee bags in our hand, and then a Mars that we could also use to disrupt them as well. So we're going to go ahead and clear the Solgaleo out. And here, basically, they have to get a Cosmog down, but I mean, honestly, there's nothing that they can do, right? Like, we have the Eevee bag, so even if they can evolve into the Morlaw, they can't survive a hit from us because we have that extra 10 damage that we can add to our attack, right? The Shiinotic does have, I believe, a 90 HP, so without the Eevee bag, it could actually survive, give them the chance to get a Cosmog online and get a Solgaleo up, but they know they're unable to do that. And so we go ahead and take the game. All right, heading into the second game here, we're going to go ahead and see that we lost the coin toss here. So we're going to be going first, which is not very ideal for this deck. We see Water Energy, and so that most likely means that it's going to be a Greninja deck, I would say. That's kind of the majority of the decks I see with Water these last couple sets. And so we're going to go ahead and put down both of our EVs. We know that since we're going first, we're most likely not going to have the opportunity or the time to use the Find a Friend on Eevee, right? So we're going to have to aim to just try to evolve into our Espeon as soon as possible so that we can immediately start, healing and swinging. So we've got all of our EVs, so we've got our entire bench stacked. And so ideally what we want is to start drawing some Sylveons so that we can get more card draw, as well as into our Espeon, right? And then evolving the lead Eevee into that Espeon, healing, attacking, while we draw more cards and eventually try to build into a second Espeon in the back. Now we do see an Eevee and a Froakie here, so that's going to tell me that this is the Greninja deck that's paired with Giratina. So, you know, a deck that aims to be kind of a controlled deck, has a lot of decision to be made with Eevee bags here and Espeon's healing capability. It kind of nullifies this deck quite a bit because that 20 damage shot from Greninja just doesn't really do a whole lot. So we have a Pokeball that just ends up going to waste. We go ahead and draw into our Professor's Research. We see we've got 2 Eevee bags and a giant cape here. When you pair that with Espeon, you'll notice that you get quite a bit of sustain, which is pretty incredible. And so because we're not really at risk of anything major on the on the return, we don't see any psychic energy in their queue, so they can't really evolve into Sylveon and attack into us. We're just going to go ahead and attack into the helmet, no problem. So we see they get the Giratina down, and they can actually now start putting energy on that and building that up. That is their win con, right? Their goal is to essentially, start pinging you with Greninja, using Cyrus to pull up Pokemon up that you don't want up, and then, hitting for that big 130 attack from the Giratina. So that's their game plan. Now, the nice thing is we can actually nullify a lot of the damage that they're going to be trying to put on our back line with those Eevee bags and with Espeon. But we have to draw into Espeon first. So we see that they're able to get into their first Greninja here, and they're going to be able to start pinging while building up that Giratina in the back. And you see that they actually opt to put the water energy on the Giratina, which means they really want to get that up as soon as possible versus trying to have the Greninja in as an actual attacker while also pinging the back line. So we can see the opponent, making a couple decisions. They get their other Froakie down, so now they're going to want to start building into that second Greninja, so they can start pinging for 40, which is, not terrible for us, but obviously a little more than we can handle with our current kind of support and Espeon healing. So we draw into the Espeon, and that was literally the absolute best draw that we could have asked for. Absolute best draw. We can now actually heal that damage from the Greninja. We can go ahead, obviously put the, use the essentially, use the super Cybolt in order to hit into the Sylveon X. And now if they leave that up, they're at risk of sacrificing 2 knockout points. So they kind of have to decide what they want to do here. Are they going to leave that up, just sacrifice it, or are they going to put something else up into us? And now, because they didn't put that water energy on their Greninja last turn, they're kind of in a weird position, right? Like they could have actually pulled their Greninja up here and actually pinged us for 80 damage, which would have been quite devastating, right? But then they would not be able to put any energy on Giratina. And they would also be putting their Greninja in, making it pretty vulnerable on the backswing. So we see that they ping the Sylveon in the back line, which is interesting here. I'm assuming that maybe they want to try and tempo this up with Osiris to kind of slow us down, but not really exactly sure. So we draw into another Sylveon, and of course we're going to drop that immediately and draw into 2 more cards here. We've got the 2 Eevee bags in our hand, which gives us a lot of flexibility, right? And so we also have the backup Espeon that we can start building, which is perfect. That's exactly where we want to put that energy. And we've got a Professor's Research. Now, the issue here is that we're not really looking to draw into anything specific. And obviously, drawing into using the Professor's Research, drawing into 2 more cards that we're not going to use this turn, just puts us really at risk at a red card or a Mars. And so we want to try to avoid doing that. And so the decision here is that we're actually going to, heal the lead Espeon, and we're not going to play the Professor's Research. Instead, we're going to go ahead and use the Eevee bag here in order to just fully heal up the rest of our Pokemon so they can't actually Cyrus us without using another ping from Greninja. And we're going to go ahead and swing into their Giratina and essentially putting it in a position where it's going to get 1 hit knocked out without any type of healing. Now, I believe this deck does run Irida, so we may see them use that here in order to put their Giratina out of range of our Espeon X. We do have a red in our deck, which would essentially be somewhat helpful here, as we could stack that with our Eevee bag, and that would, essentially allow us to be able to get into range of this, Giratina's HP pool, but we would have to draw into that next turn. So you see they go ahead and they ping the lead Espeon, they put that final energy on Giratina, and Giratina is now in a position where it can swing next turn. Now they do have a juicy hand, right, that we potentially might want to hit with that Mars, but to be honest, they've been bricking on, I'm assuming, that rare candy to get that Froakie into a Greninja. So to be honest, I don't want to actually give them the chance of giving them that combo of cards, even if it is going to reduce their hand down to 3. And instead, we're most likely going to play the professor's research in order to kind of, get some more trainers into our hand and give us some more of that flexibility, specifically that Cyrus that can allow us to pull that Sylveon X up when we need it to clear the game out. So here we have a decision to make. We want to essentially put the Giratina in a position where if they do decide to swing into us without heals, it would KO itself, right? It does that 20 recoil damage. And so using the EV bag here in order to hit it for 10 just puts it in that perfect range where they're not at 20 HP and they have to make a decision. If they don't have any heals and they want to swing into us, they're going to be sacrificing their Giratina. And then that puts them very vulnerable with that Sylveon in the back that essentially can be Cyrused up and cleared out pretty easily. So they go ahead and actually put the helmet on the Giratina and use an Irida. So they did have that Irida to heal it and at least give them the opportunity to swing into our Espeon. But here's the thing. We have an Espeon X on the bench, fully loaded with energy and ready to go. We also have another psychic energy that we'll be able to put down on Sylveon so that for whatever reason they we need to pull that up, is just one energy away from being able to attack. So we go ahead and use the ability there. We're going to retreat back into our Espeon X, and to be honest, we're in a really good spot here. Like, there's not really a whole lot they can do. I think generally their hardest hitting Pokemon are going to be the Greninjas that they have in the back, and honestly, our Espeon can handle that pretty easily, especially with our ability to heal. So we're just going to go ahead and we're going to swing into that Giratina X. We probably should have used the ability there, even though we are in a good spot. That was a bit of a misplay for me. I didn't use the second ability and kind of heal that additional 30 damage on the backline Espeon. But to be honest, they can't knock it out with 2 hits from the Greninja. But if they decide to Cyrus it up, it is now in range where it can be cleared out by the double Greninjas. And so it looks like they are, going to go ahead and ping one of my Pokemon here, but to be honest, with the Cyrus, and it doesn't look like they are, going to be using a Mars or a red card here. We are in pretty good position. So they go ahead, they ping the lead Espeon, they ping it twice. This makes me think that they now have a Cyrus that they're going to use to pull up the Espeon in the back and clear it out with the Greninja. And it looks like that's the case. They do. And they're going to go ahead and clear that out. But to be honest, not a whole lot they can do here, right? Because they use that Cyrus. We know we have our Cyrus, and we can go ahead and pull up that Sylveon and call this game. And as you can see, this is a game where basically both of us nearly drew through our entire deck for the most part. It was very much a control matchup versus a control matchup. But as you can see, when you get both your Espeons online like that, and you can, cycle them up and down and heal for 60, it's just a lot of times going to be too much, specifically for these decks that rely on chip damage. All right, getting into the third matchup here, we see that we are once again going first. Unfortunately, not ideal, and we see electric energy, so I'm going to assume that this is probably an Oricorio deck, might be a Tapu Koko deck, and so we can start kind of game planning for that. Decks that like to move really, really quickly and really load up on that electrical energy early on. So we go ahead and lead our EVX here. The idea is that because we're going first, we actually know that we're probably not going to get a chance to use the Find a Friend, and so having that more bulk up front and also the ability to swing if we need to with that bulk is a little bit more ideal here and kind of how we would ideally want to start this. We can put the cape on there to give it even more bulk, even though it's not really in range of being in danger of anything that they can really put on the field, considering, generally we know that their deck is probably not going to have any huge hitters. Also, our goal is essentially to evolve into the Espeon here, which we want to do on that lead Eevee as soon as possible. possible. And we have the Sylveon, so you'll notice that playing the Cape was actually strategic, not just to add additional bulk to the EVX, but really to get our hand size down, so that way it was less tempting for them to use a red card or a Mars on us and then lose that Sylveon. So we now are basically fully stacked on basics. Every Pokeball we draw here is pretty much a dead draw, so kind of sucks. Really hope that we see those as the very last cards in the deck. We place down the Sylveon, and we're really searching here for a Espeon. Now, we know that they can't really punish us that hard right now, so rather than playing the professor's research and just loading our hand up and giving them even more stuff to target, we're going to go ahead and swing with the Eevee and just start chipping down the Zeraora. This also, if we are able to get into our Espeon in the next turn, it also puts the Zeraora in a range where we can actually one-shot it. So we see that they throw up the red card. Great, they did get a card of advantage there, but it just gives us 2 Espeons, which honestly is all we really, really need in this matchup. And so you see Pokeball, a dead card. Unfortunately, we go ahead and just throw that out. We're going to go ahead and drop a Cape on the Eevee in the back, and then we're going to go ahead and throw up both our Espeons. Now, we probably could have held on to that Cape, to be honest. We're just, allowing ourselves to get punished even harder by a Guzma. But, to be honest, I don't think it's going to play that big of a role here. I think getting the Espeon up on curve, being able to essentially negate most of the damage that Zeraora did, and then being able to take that first point, honestly, is probably going to be a little too much for them. So, if they have something where they can move an energy over to Tapu Koko and hit us for 90, that could be a little bit punishing here, but we're really already to the point where we're going to be starting to build up the Espeon on the back. So we're actually comfortable and okay with the lead Espeon being getting taken out and putting them in a spot where they have to sacrifice their Tapu Koko. So they're going to swing, do 90, and we're going to be able to heal up. Unfortunately, we won't be able to get back over that 90 break point there. So a little bit unfortunate unless we were to switch this Espeon out. But instead, I think the better play is to actually swing into the Tapu Koko and really make them make the decision, right? Like, there's nothing they can really swing back with against our Espeon. And if they swing in to knock out our Espeon, we have ours in the back to just come right at it. So they're kind of in a tough spot here, and I think the opponent knows this. And so you're going to see they're going to concede, and we go ahead and take that game. All right, moving into the 4th and final game here, we're going to once again see what the coin flip is, and we lose it again, going first. So on the back foot in every single one of these games, and honestly, that just goes to show you how powerful this deck is, right? It wants to go second, but we're still able to get some really clean and dominating wins while going first. And so we see Dark Energy, we see the Darkrai thrown down, and there's any number of decks that this could really be right now. I think I've seen 3 decks running around. There's the classic Darkrai Giratina, there's the Crobat version, and then I've even been seeing a Solgaleo version that's been running around recently with a couple babies. And so, here it's, I would say, like, definitely not the most ideal matchup for us, considering the Espeon does take super effective damage if they end up powering the Darkrai and kind of swinging in for that. But to be honest, this deck is just so good that, you have so many ways to kind of attack this, these Darkrai decks that, still feeling pretty good, even though we are going first. And, this is a little bit of a type weakness matchup. And so once again, you see here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to play put the EVs down. Because we know their deck is a little bit slower moving, we actually lead with the Find a Friend so that we actually can use that to get some card advantage, because we know that they're not really going to be putting pressure on us since they're deciding to kind of, load up on the Darkrai. And so this gives us the opportunity to not only, drop down the Sylveon, draw more cards, we can use the Cape to give our Eevee a little more buffer if we want to, knowing that we're ultimately going to be evolving or wanting to evolve that lead Eevee into Espeon and starting to swing against them. Now, if they are able to, get like a Poison Dart or something up on the Darkrai, that does become even more problematic for us, because now since we are an energy behind them, they will get to the 3 energy on Darkrai and essentially get to, swing into us without us really having the opportunity to pressure them, too much. So we watch and see what the opponent does, right? We see Right now we're feeling okay, right? I think that this matchup, like there's still a lot of options here. I think that we know we can evolve into the leads Espeon, and then we can just go ahead and start swinging into the Darkrai. Now, seeing the Poison Dart is a little bit problematic for us, as that does put us in a position where the poison damage plus, that extra Neolego hit that's going to give us is going to put us in a range where the Darkrai is going to be able to clear our Espeon out. So a little tough here, not exactly sure what we're going to do, but one of the really cool things about the way this deck works is if you really think about the Sylveon non-X version and kind of what that's capable of and how it kind of is this just like really flexible additional option in your deck that's really, built for Oricorio but can do a lot more. You see here, we have enough evolutions to essentially stack the entire back line. So rather than actually leading on that Espeon and most likely putting it in a position where if we swing into the Darkrai, it's just going to get taken out on the backswing, we actually need to find a way to clear the Darkrai in one hit. And the only way to do that is by dropping down the non-X Sylveon. So we go ahead and do that. We know we have the red in hand. So with that red and the, essentially evolving both the EVs in the back, we know we are able to get to, I think, 150 attack power with this Sylveon and clear out their Darkrai. Now, drawing into both EVs is even better. We could either use those for energy, or we could actually just, add the plus, or for health, or just add the plus 10 to our Sylveon. You see we're at 130 with our base attack. So all we have to do here is just bring up the EV bag. And to be honest, it would probably be smarter to use red here since this is the only X Pokemon they have on the board. So honestly, it doesn't really matter because they don't have any backswing that they can come at us with. Seeing that the Neolegos in the back are energy dry. And we know that even with the extra poison damage that this is going to do, we're going to survive with 10 HP and be able to swing back into whatever they put up. And so you can see here, going against kind of a type weakness, essentially them getting like generally what I would say is one of the best draws and setups that they could have with against our deck specifically, right? With the double Neolego and the Darkrai up front with poison energy and first energy advantage. They essentially had the dream set up, but here you can see that with the card draw, and also consider that we got Marsed and lost a card at the beginning of this game, right? So we were already down a card, and you can see that by having these Sylveons, being able to drop them down, chain ourselves into some card advantage, and basically getting to a point where by the time we're putting our second or third energy down, our second energy down, we're able to swing for 140 or 150 and clear out their lead mon. So much flexibility in this deck, and you can see just how it leads up to the Darkrai Golbat or the Darkrai Crobat deck. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this deck and kind of wrap things up. So I think first and foremost, you saw this deck has tons of versatility. It wants to go second and doesn't really have a great draw for going first. Probably the one downside of this deck, but honestly, getting Espeon on curve, even when you're going first, ends up being extremely powerful and can run over a lot of decks. Now, you'll notice that we never had to put energy on Sylveon X, and honestly, it's really just there to draw cards for you, and to be honest, it's all about getting both your Espeons online as quick as possible, and then using your utility cards to essentially work around your opponent. Cape, EV Bag are extremely important and extremely helpful in this deck. You'll notice that I showed 2 silvers here, but I actually moved away from using silver and played a lot of my games with 2 capes and 2 EV Bags. And I just felt like that just gave me a lot more flexibility. It helped me kind of clear those breakpoints, particularly as you're really just trying to play your Espeons, and sometimes that 140 is just not quite enough. Getting them up to that 160 breakpoint really is crucial, and with a lot of the decks I'm seeing in the meta today. So you can really customize this however you want. It's extremely powerful, extremely potent. One of the more fun decks that I've gotten to play with. And I would say that honestly, Espeon X really surprised me. I did not think it was going to be that good. But, honestly, it holds its own. It is literally the centerpiece of this deck. It's literally everything's built around it and it doing all of the work. Once again, I really enjoyed this deck, and I hope that you get a lot of success out of it too. Now, if you like this kind of content, feel free to like the video if you haven't already, or subscribe to the channel. If you're still here, I appreciate it. My goal is to bring in-depth kind of masterclass guides on what I believe are the best decks to grind the ladder with in each new meta every month. Yes, I was on a little bit of a hiatus the last 2 months as I was away on business travel, but I'm back and I look forward to making a bunch of these videos for all of you and hope that you are able to utilize them to have success on the ladder. With that said, I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.